Hi there, thanks for joining me. So today I would like to talk about translation projects for the Sega Dreamcast. Specifically, I would like to ask for your input on what games you would like to see translated for the Dreamcast. Before we dive into that, I do want to offer a thank you, very heartfelt thank you to my patrons over the years. Omar Ali, David, Lord Zeto, Carl Evans, Matthew H., John Nguyen. Thank you so much. Not all of these folks, are like current patrons of mine. I believe the only one currently a patron is Carl Evans. So thank you so much. A special thank you out to you. I have actually decided to suspend my Patreon page. So the main reason for that is because I'm just not making much content for this Playongo channel anymore. I really appreciate all of the support that you guys have given me, and I intend, of course, to continue making videos on this channel, right? But it's just not a focus of mine. If you guys would like to support my efforts financially, please consider becoming a patron of the PCFX fan club that I'm doing with my buddy Ben. So that is a podcast that we're doing at least, approximately every 3 months. And we're also interspersing our regular podcast episodes with interview episodes. So, so we've had an episode out every, month and a half to 2 months for the most part so far. And, it's been really well received, and we're doing really cool stuff. Our most recent interview, we just got a chance to interview a graphics artist who worked at HuneX back in the day, developing for PCFX games. So I recommend you guys check that out and support our Patreon if you would like to support that effort. So this list of games here, it is highly biased toward my preferences, right? So these are games that, for one reason or another, and I will talk about those reasons, I would like to translate. But I'm making this video and not just picking something frivolously because I do not see myself translating very many games for the Dreamcast, right? I'm looking at this as maybe a 1 or possibly 2 projects, and I'm not looking at anything more than that, right? So if I'm basically like, I'm just going to translate 1 game for the Dreamcast, or maybe 2, I don't want this to just be me. I would really like your input on this. I have set some rules for this list. So one of them is no PC ports. There are a number of games that I would have liked to put on this list. Things like Nezu, right? That's a game that I played on my channel. I didn't really play it. I showed off some gameplay when I picked it up. And things like Candy Stripe, right? I really enjoyed that. There is like an adult's version of that called Sweet. I would much rather see those PC versions get translated, and that's not what I'm doing with this initiative here. And I definitely have a focus on Dreamcast exclusives. There are non-exclusives on here, and I'm going to talk about why I think that those might be important. But if there's a game that is only available on the Dreamcast and was not ported to any other consoles and was not ported from PC, I think that has an importance to the library of the Dreamcast that goes beyond games that were also released on the PlayStation 2, for instance, or the PlayStation. So let's get started here. So for starters, we have Angel Present. So this is, of course, somebody else's gameplay of this. Vice the Determined 2. Very cool guy. He and his bro have been posting like gameplay from all kinds of Japanese games for years and years now. So those guys are great. And I have talked about this game before. I think what really interests me about this game is, one, it's a Dreamcast exclusive. It's developed by HuneX and Studio Ox. So, you can see from the designs here, Studio Ox did like the character designs, probably, just basically graphics and things like that for this game. There's FMV, that's really nice. And, this speaking of the PCFX, so I definitely have an interest in certain developers and threads that go through like from one console to another, right? So for instance, the Dreamcast itself, right, when it was discontinued as a hardware platform, Sega continued to make games on the Xbox and the Dreamcast, publish games, and publishers who were developing games for the Dreamcast developed games for those other platforms, and I feel like it's kind of the life of the console, and the developers and the publishers like lives on into the future, even though the hardware platform is no longer available. So I kind of feel that way with things that are published by NEC Interchannel and developed by Hunex in particular, are very much games in the spirit of the PCFX, right? So when I look at Angel Present, I think of a game that would have come out on the PCFX. Somebody said that, between the cable TV station that has a strong local flavor, children playing in nature, the Seinendan who are working hard to revitalize the town, the feeling of the countryside setting is impressive. So they're praising the setting of this game. They say the action scenes become more challenging as the story progresses, and by the end of the game they become challenging, which makes the game very rewarding. The Other World, and so when Other World, basically the premise of this game is that you're an illustrator, right? And you're working in Tokyo. You go back to your hometown, right? I believe you're like an apprentice, so the person you're apprenticing with goes on vacation or something like that. They go on sabbatical, and so you take this opportunity to go back home, and you want to prove yourself, right? And you're kind of in a slump. You've got like writer's block or whatever. You run into this fairy creature that shows up. I think it's in this scene. We've seen her already, and you're like, what the heck? And so it sounds like there is this fantasy element to this, where there's some other world, some spirit world, basically, that you end up interacting with, which sounds really interesting. I don't know that this is an RPG, for instance, although it does seem like there's some kind of action scenes of some sort. It seems more like what you would call an adventure game, right? But anyway, so the person writing this review is available at this URL. It's really attractive because it expresses the conflicts of the human heart in a fantastical world like a fairy tale, right? So this seems like this other world has some kind of symbolic representation of the real world, right? So, they are saying that they wish they had shown I guess sort of not just this world of the heroine, right? And it sounds like it could be a romantic adventure game in that respect, or maybe it's just a straight up story and there's only one ending. I'm not sure, but also sort of completed this other world of like the other characters, the main characters and other characters in the game. But anyway, like this review in particular had a positive impression of this game, right? I had a positive impression of it when I started playing it, and the fact that it's a Dreamcast exclusive really raises it in my eyes in terms of something that could be worth translating, like deserves to be translated on this system. Alright, so here we have Happy Lesson. This is also a Dreamcast exclusive, which I think is pretty interesting for this kind of game. Again, kind of like Angel Present. This appears to be a romantic adventure game. I did show this off when I picked it up, and it has a really funny premise. The premise of the game is that you have been recently orphaned. You're like a high school student, right? And so you live at like a boarding school, and like you've just lost your parents, right? So several of the teachers, I believe it's 5 of the teachers at the school, decide to basically be your surrogate parents and come like live with you, right? So that you aren't just alone by yourself. So it's like a romantic adventure game. This spawned multiple animated TV shows and OVA series. I did watch at least one of those back in the day, and I remember enjoying it. And this is paraphrased from like Visual Novel Database and this review here, which are available at these URLs, that, you know, the routine of life revolves around the dynamics of interaction between you and your new caretakers who work in different careers and wield specific skills which they can teach you. Okay, so that's interesting because I do wonder if there's maybe a little bit of a simulation element to this. It says Happy Lesson plays in the style of an interaction game where the feelings of the other characters are affected by your actions and conversational abilities. Now, I wouldn't expect anything, particularly unexpected, I guess, from the gameplay for this. I have a feeling it's a pretty traditional adventure game. But the more I look at this, I mean, it seems super interesting. So this apparently came out of a project from Dengeki G's magazine. And I didn't realize, but I guess this is basically how Sister Princess started as well. We may talk about that more later. There's some sort of reader interaction through this magazine to kind of craft a narrative. So it's interesting to hear about it from that perspective. And then I believe there was I think some sort of story, maybe even like a light novel or something, or like a manga series that was made for this. Obviously an anime series, which seems like it was relatively successful. And this game, it sounds like this game is based more on the manga story, right? So that alone interests me, right? From what I see on this playlist here, it looks like it's a pretty long playthrough that they do here. Each of these is like 25-30 minutes long. There are 91 parts to this, and from what I can tell, this looks like specifically a route of one of your classmates, right? So it looks like there are romantic roots in this, and I believe you can pursue romantically any of the 5 kind of surrogate mothers here that come and like live with you who are your teachers, and also like maybe 1 or 2 of your classmates too. So I dig these kinds of games, and I think that this, if you just add this up, it seems like getting through all the routes is probably a good, 45 hours or so, depending on how fast you went through it. I just think that this is a game that I would enjoy translating, and I think that could definitely be worthwhile to have translated. And I apologize, I didn't properly credit this individual. This gameplay is from Start On Games 2. So this is July. I also picked this game up and featured it in a pickups video at one point. This is, again, a very interesting game, okay? A Dreamcast exclusive. This is a novel-style adventure game. It actually has an interesting mechanic where you switch back and forth between 2 main characters. You also, basically choose from different locations in the world. But from what I hear, that's a little half-baked, because I think it does sort of feel like you're just kind of like with traditional Japanese adventure games, where you're pretty much just picking items off a menu until you find the right one to progress the story. It sounds like this adventure game July might suffer a little bit from that style of gameplay, right? This is developed by 45, and they are the developers of Tokyo Bus Guide, which is another game that probably is worth being translated. I actually kind of forget, did I go over any of these? These are the games that have been translated for the Dreamcast. There are not a lot, right? Tokyo Bus, I don't think Tokyo Bus Guide has been translated. Anyway, I'm not going to translate Tokyo Bus Guide. I don't really remember how much text there is in it anyway. But yeah, so this stands out because it was a launch title. It was a launch title, and also this developer 45, I do not think they did a whole lot of stuff, right? For starters, it has this really just dark, ominous atmosphere, which I really enjoy. The character designs, I think, are super cool. And so basically, the 2 young men that you're switching back and forth between, Makoto and Joshua, I believe Makoto is investigating a bus bombing. And it was a bombing that killed his family. I believe it killed his mom, maybe his sister. I think his dad might still be alive, but they're kind of estranged, and it's just, this is all very like Chunibyo, dark and depressing stuff. Everybody's orphans that have lost their parents and stuff like that. It's the sort of B movie like feeling that I just like. So one of the things that's really cool about this though is it says there are over 150 characters in the game. Okay, not all of them are interactive. So what that means is you have an adventure style game where like you can go different places and you end up like seeing a lot of characters who are just like NPCs in the world, and it sounds like some of them maybe you can't even really interact with in particularly meaningful ways, right? The character designs are by two very interesting artists, Tony Takezaki, who I believe is an artist who worked on AD Police. He also worked on Genocyber, which is another like kind of dark, brutal, like cyberpunk thing that I really enjoy, right? And then you also have Yasuomi Uematsu, who is the guy who did Kite. If you guys are familiar with that, he's worked on a whole bunch of other anime. He's like had a long career in anime. He has very distinctive character designs, and his stuff is super interesting. I love the fact that these two did these character designs, that there's like over 150 characters in the game. This is kind of unique. One criticism it seems like people have of this game is there's no voice acting, but that's just a thing. So again, like the plot too, it's like apparently it's really a product of its time, where if you remember like Clamp doing the manga series X like 1999, something like that, it was all about like the turn of the century, right? We're going from 1999 to 2000. We're going from, what is it, the 20th century to the 21st century, right? And these sort of like apocalyptic sort of prophecy, like the world could end right at the turn of the century, and it sounds so interesting. They say, so as he's like Makoto's investigating this bus bombing, like they uncover a plot by an evil race of genderless beings to bring about the prophesized end of the world through their secret puppet corporation NAX. Because I haven't played through this game, right? Is the payout of this story, is the payoff going to be enough? I don't know. Maybe I'm going to have to personally like play through one or two of these games to decide if it's like one that I want to translate, right? But we're all going into this just based on the information that we have, right? I would like for you guys to tell me what of these games I talk about you guys would be interested in me translating, and this is just the information we have to go on. So apparently the story takes place over about 18 days, takes about 7 to 8 hours to finish, and I just looked at a couple. I don't even know, I didn't actually write down where the reviews were from, so I'll do that for this, but I basically just looked at a couple reviews for it, and like it sounds like people are like, yeah, I didn't really have high expectations for this, and like it was better than I thought it was going to be, right? And that's like better than low expectations doesn't necessarily mean good, right? But that's the kind of thing that sometimes I really dig, right? Where it's not like it's a great game, but it's a game that was better than you were expecting because you gave it the opportunity to surprise you, and that kind of seems like what this game is. So I don't know, I really think that this deserves to be on this list of potential games that I translate. Okay, so I kind of forget if I credited the last person. I thought it was maybe Sega Sky, something like that. Anyway, that user's name is on the video footage. But yeah, so Kaen Sabo, the Virgin on Megiddo. I do not know exactly what that means, but I did play, just a little bit of this game and show it off in one of my pickup videos. Another Dreamcast exclusive. This is really interesting. Developed by Studio Line, the developer of Dokoku Soshite, which I believe are like those, gosh, is that the Data East one of the Data East adventure games. I kind of forget, but there's a handful of adventure games on the Saturn that have this really interesting style. And just looking at this, I don't know if I checked to see if it is definitely the same character designer, but man, these character designs look really similar, right? And I love the character designs. Like I said, for starters, I like the pedigree on this, just in general. But, so the story, right, so this is paraphrased from this review, I think. It says, powerful companies decide to build a new city, this so-called intelligent city, but something goes wrong, and a virus that creates a fire-like substance inside of human beings' bodies is causing spontaneous human combustion. Man, that's an interesting premise, right? It sounds like this is like really dystopian future, really Big Brother stuff. Like, I actually kind of think that this character here, who is like, you know, I don't know what she's doing, like laying on top of you, having just taken your picture here, is like some kind of reporter, and I think she's actually trying to gain access to this city because you're being sent to this city. So it's let's see, Kento, I guess, is this character, will have to solve the case by finding the best strategy through talking to the beautiful high school female students. So like I don't know if you're a high school student, I think, who maybe is going to school there. But anyway, it's like an adventure game. I think it's a little bit more in the style of like an actual Western adventure game. There's items that must be found, picked up, and used at appropriate moments, okay? This reminds me of, it was either Dokoku Soshite or it was Refrain. I think I have it down here. Revive Sose. That I also checked out, which I also thought looked really cool. That's another one of those kind of adventure games. So that's interesting enough in itself, right? There's areas where you move through a 3D-like environment, viewing it from a first-person perspective, which I think is super interesting. And during the dialogue, you also have commands that are accessible through a menu, and there are segments with a time limit. All of these things are coming together to just sort of go, oh, like, this seems like a really interesting kind of adventure game with a lot of different gameplay elements, with like a really interesting science fiction sort of dystopian future story premise, and like character designs that I like, right? So this kind of instantly shot up to and because it's a Dreamcast exclusive, like I'm really interested in this game. So I want to hear what you guys think. If you guys think, I mean, with all of these, obviously, is this the game that I should be translating? And actually, I should have probably said it before now. What I would like for people to do is to rank these games. So you don't have to rank the whole list. Pick your top, 2 or 3, or if you want to just say this is the one, that's fine. But please go ahead and rank maybe 1, 2, and 3. These are the top games that out of this list that you guys would like to see me translate. Please comment that in the comments. I'll say that again at the end. Oh yeah, and I don't know why I can't think to try to credit the people that post these, when I initially start playing the video. But God, what is that? Kaseijin no Mitsuda-san wa. I should probably be able to read that. Shinai de ge. It's like game bakari yatteiru. Okay, so thanks for posting this whole. It's like a whole. This is a whole playlist. So that's impressive. Oh, again, actually, maybe we should check the playlist. So yeah, at least like 20-25 hours of gameplay on that. Seems like a really interesting game. Why don't we go ahead and use my video footage for this? Kita e. Oh boy, this is another one. So seems like a romantic adventure game, right? Another Dreamcast exclusive. This is not available on any other console. There is a sequel that is on the PlayStation 2. In fact, there's a couple sequels, I believe. It spawned here we go. At the end, I actually mentioned it spawned a series of 4 games total. But what's really interesting about this, it's developed by Red Entertainment and published by Hudson. Now, this is something probably we're going to talk about quite a bit more on the PCFX Fan Club podcast, but Red Entertainment has developed a whole lot of cool stuff. Kind of specifically the Sakura Wars series on the Saturn, right? And actually, I kind of forget. I feel like Sakura Wars might be published by Sega, but Red Entertainment and Hudson have worked together on other stuff too. And anyway, that's a team that inspires confidence in me. In fact, I feel like I've kind of been wanting to translate something by Red Entertainment for a while. This has illustrations by Ashito Oyari, whom I like their illustrations. You know, for what that's worth, I really like them. He draws really beautiful girls, and I mean, you can see just from like the character designs that we have here. It's just they're really nice. I have played other games that have character designs by this artist. I actually just like them. And the premise of this story is the player travels to Hokkaido. He encounters 8 different girls. It's a romantic adventure game, etc., etc. So, including the lead character, Kotori Haruno, I believe we just saw her, whose family he stays with during his time up north. In a romantic adventure game, I believe that there are romantic roots for the 8 different characters, but it seems pretty cool. It seems like you explore the island. Probably initially here, it seems like that girl meets you at the airport and kind of like guides you around Hokkaido. From one review I was reading, and it may have been a little bit tongue-in-cheek, so it was hard for me to tell, but it seemed like there are actually kind of traveling Hokkaido and seeing like real places in Hokkaido kind of seemed like a thing. It's not just mini games, it feels kind of like a Shenmue sort of experience, right? It seems like there's a little bit of a simulation experience where like you can play video games, you can go karaoke, you can go shopping in this town and stuff like that. And like this says, most of all, you try to find that special someone to share your heart with. The fact that this, spawned a series of games, and really, from what I can tell, just seems to be rather well regarded. I think that this is it's a pretty interesting romantic adventure game, right? On the Dreamcast, that I think would definitely be worth seeing in English. Again, the fact that it's a Dreamcast exclusive, it's developed by Red Entertainment, and it features an illustrator whom I like, are all things that pique my interest for this as a potential translation project. Next up, we have Langrisser Millennium. I think this may be the only game on here that I don't actually know if I own, and I'm not sure that I've played any of it. We're going to have some footage here from I Play Sega. So the thing with Langrisser Millennium is it's a Dreamcast exclusive, which is interesting. Langrisser is a series that I'm starting to get into more. Again, this has roots to an extent in the PCFX, right? It, I believe, originally started, on Sega, on the Genesis, the Mega Drive, right? There is a version of the original Langrisser, I believe, for the Super Nintendo. So it's a cross-platform series, right? But this particular game, Langrisser Millennium, is a Dreamcast exclusive. It's developed by Santa Entertainment, published by NCS Corporation. And what's interesting about this, the gameplay is described as similar to Dragon Force, which may be nothing to folks watching this, but Dragon Force is a game that I played a lot on the Saturn. It's really cool because it's essentially a tactical RPG, but it's more of a, maybe it's just more of a tactical strategy game. You basically send commanders out on a map, and you explore that map, hitting towns, and at those towns you recruit soldiers, and then when you meet other commanders on this map, you fight them with your commanders and the soldiers that you've recruited, right? The commanders have abilities, and the soldiers will be like of a particular type, let's say. So, one guy can recruit monks, and one guy can recruit cavalry, and one guy can recruit zombies because he's a necromancer or something. I'm not saying that this is how it works in this game, but it sounds like this has similar gameplay, and it makes a lot of sense because the Langrisser series, I've started playing what is effectively Langrisser 2 on the PCFX, and Langrisser 2 plays pretty similarly to Dragon Force, or you might actually say Dragon Force plays similarly to the Langrisser series, but it's a little different because the Langrisser series doesn't have that overmap. It doesn't really have that like strategy element to it, but I think this game does. I think they added that to this one in particular. You can see it's a 3D game, has these nice 2D portraits. I don't know if there's like some gameplay in here we could look at. I kind of just paraphrased from Moby Games here. It says, in map mode, you move your characters over a map, trying to reach enemy fortresses. Oh, here we go. And prevent the enemy from reaching yours. Everything happens in real time. If you do nothing, the enemy will come and conquer your country. Once in battle mode, you control several teams. You only assign actions to the team leaders, while the others fight automatically in round-based strategy combat. Yeah. This seems like the kind of game, again, if I were going to translate one game on the Dreamcast, this is potentially one that could really be worth translating, right? So now we're going to get to cross-platform games. The first one is Black Matrix. Black Matrix was originally, I believe, released on the Saturn. So the Dreamcast is kind of a port. It's Black Matrix AD on the Dreamcast, which is Black Matrix Advanced. And then on the PlayStation, it's Black Matrix Plus. So let me bring up footage. We're actually going to go back to my video here. This is from 10 years ago. And this game made an impression on me at the time. So it does seem to have, I don't know, Galgay elements at the very least. Here you pick your buddy, quote unquote. It's developed by Flight Plan, and I just have kind of a soft spot for Flight Plan. I haven't actually played their games. I believe they are the developers of the Summon Night series and also Eternal Poison on the PlayStation 2. I really love the visual style of Eternal Poison. It's this really gothic-y, dark fantasy, and Black Matrix reminds me of that as well. This also is published by NEC Interchannel, so it has that impression to me, like, again, this through line from the PCFX. Combines standard tactical RPG gameplay with a pastiche of Judeo-Christian religious themes, particularly concerning the nature of good and evil. Basically, it has this really kind of unsubtle, sort of like slavery and racism, sort of like, especially like a caste system in this world. So you have, like, there's these white-winged angels and these black-winged angels, essentially, or maybe devils, but the white-winged characters are basically completely enslaved by, like, the black-winged characters. And it's interesting. And the nature of good and evil, the interplay between heaven, hell, and earth, the dissonance of each of those worlds. It spawned a 3-game series. So the original Black Matrix, Black Matrix 2, which was released on the PlayStation 2, Black Matrix 0, which was released on the GBA, and later the GBA version was also released on PlayStation as Black Matrix 0. When it comes to RPGs these days, I tend to like tactical RPGs more anyway, I think. And like I said, this game just made such an impression on me when I tried it out. I think it looks super interesting. Like I said, I have an interest in kind of Flight Plan's stuff, and this just seems like a game that could be really a good choice for a translation project. We'll use my footage again. So this is Erde, Nezu no ki no Shita de. So it's under the which tree is it? Juniper trees, maybe? Something like that. This is developed and published by Kindle Imagine Develop. This is another one where just the premise of it kind of stood out to me. The scenario writer is Nishikawa Maoto, who also worked on My Merry May and My Merry Maybe and some other stuff. I think with Kid, maybe some other developers, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm not necessarily familiar with this scenario writer, but I thought the premise of this was so interesting, and it sounds like some of the other games that they've worked on have been well received, narrative-wise. So, apparently in this world, the average life expectancy for humans is 25 years old. I mentioned that here in this intro. You were at the, funeral, it seems like, of your mom. I think she lived to be 28 or something, which was considered old. I thought this was really interesting. At the time, I was comparing it to Logan's Run, if you're familiar with that. I believe it's a book/film. So it's an interesting science fiction here. Compulsory education has been abolished. The person I'm paraphrasing from is, describing this as a very enviable world where you can spend your days in a virtual world without doing any work. And what they mean by that is, I think, you can see these chairs here. These characters have these virtual reality setups, and that's basically how they live their life. So you think of something like Ready Player One, right? And this is in this Dreamcast game from, probably around 2001 or something like that. I really love the premise for this story. At least the world building is super interesting. So between the Ready Player One, actually it reminds me also of the movie Existence by David Cronenberg, if you're familiar with that at all. That also had this people living in this kind of maybe post-apocalyptic setting where I don't know, they primarily interacted with the world by plugging into some sort of virtual reality network and things like that. Anyway, so one day Yoko, a traveler who wants to discover the world, crashes her motorcycle into these people's house. Or Takumi, I guess, is the main character, wants to stay in Takumi's house for a while, and Takumi starts asking himself if he should also start discovering new things. So it's interesting, you have these, on one side, these characters who are basically living their lives through some sort of virtual reality, and then another character who is traveling around in this world, which may be, I don't know, is it a post-apocalyptic world? Is it a dystopia world? Is some kind of world that, maybe by and large has a very different society from the one that we currently have. I just find the concept of this narrative super interesting. I guess I don't know much about, honestly, the gameplay or really where this goes. I don't even know that I have run across much for reviews or anything like that. Really just based on the strength of the premise alone, I would say, is what interests me in this game. Okay, here's some Sega Sky footage again. This is Marionette Company. Now, this was actually released on quite a number of systems. The PlayStation, the Dreamcast, and I'm assuming its release on PlayStation 3 was a digital version of the PlayStation 1 game. It was also available on Vita. It may have been via similar means, the PSP and Windows. So this is developed and published by Microcabin. And, there are, as in terms of a Dreamcast game to translate, right, there are definitely a number of other platforms that conceivably someone else could translate this on. But, I picked up the Dreamcast version of this, and, just what I played of it was interesting. I remember, just being okay, you find some, android girl or something in the, abandoned on the side of the road, and actually, we're going to see a couple of stories that are pretty similar to this. I don't know if this was around the time when Clamp, again, wrote the manga Chobits, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. At any rate, what I've discovered about this as I've been looking into it more is this may be something of a simulation game. And this has piqued my interest in it a lot more than when I thought it was, I would say, just an adventure game. You're basically just working an office job, right? But you always had designs on, like, being a marionette engineer, I believe is what they're called. And so this, you kind of take this opportunity to start, like, working on your robotics here. And from what I can tell, like, you're actually, you get paid, like, on a certain day of the month from your other job. It sounds like you're able to go through, like, the days, and, like, you do different things at different times. Like, at the end of the day, like, you could travel to, let's say, the equivalent of Akihabara, and you could, like, buy parts for your marionette, or you could go and, like, talk to the marionette and kind of, like, I don't know if that, changes the character's parameters or things like that. It seems like there might also be, like, a little bit of a romantic adventure game element to this as well. And it sounds like you may even be able to have your marionette, like, once you've repaired it to a certain extent, like, go and work part-time jobs herself to, like, make more money to upgrade her more and things like that, right? It sounds like it could have such an interesting gameplay loop to it. And I don't know if you can see here, I think there's actually, there's 3D graphics where you can walk around the city and things like that, and go to different locations. I was surprised the more I looked into this game, the more interesting it really seems. So if you guys think that's interesting as well, perhaps this will go on your list as a game you'd like to see me translate for the Dreamcast. Next up, another multi-platform game. This is Mercurius Pretty. We're using some footage here from Arte. I talked about this, I think, in my very first Japanese Dreamcast pickups video. And, again, this is, like, kind of a simulation game. And I sort of dig the idea of these. This is developed by Headroom. I think maybe Headroom / Longshot LLC, published by NEC Interchannel. So again, these are strong ties to the PCFX, right? This game was not ever released on the PCFX. It was released on the PC-98. So I think that's kind of where NEC comes in. I don't know if they published it for the PC-98, but I assume that could be the case. Headroom, I believe, is the developer of, I want to say, the Graduation games. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they also developed Ojo-sama Sosamo, I think, on the PCFX. So, that's kind of, again, one of the through lines to this game for me. The other is just that, like, stylistically, this looks awesome, right? It's so cool. I love that it's a racing sim. Headroom is not a stranger to this type of gameplay, because Graduation, I believe, is also that kind of simulation game where you're, like, playing a teacher and helping students to to learn and then graduate, right? So I feel like this is a similar style of gameplay. You're raising this homunculus. You're some sort of, I don't know, alchemist, magician type of character. The interesting thing about the Dreamcast version of this game is I guess it adds a whole bunch of adventure game elements to this that actually weren't present in the original PC-98 version. Let's see, again, just I think pulled maybe from Moby Games. It's similar in concept to the Princess Maker games, without the RPG elements of the Princess Maker games, right? This seems like it's more raising simulation with adventure game elements. The goal is to raise attributes selectively and pass exams, putting the homunculus, who has to grow up as a human in a medieval fantasy world, on one of the various paths. So I guess it could be more spiritual, more combat related, more magic related, etc. I really liked the looks of this, like when I got it and when I played it. I think it could be a really interesting game to translate for the Dreamcast. Okay, we'll use some of my footage here. So for My Merry May, this is another cross-platform, Dreamcast, PS2, and PSP. I don't know, could you play PS2 games on the PSP ever? I kind of forget. Anyway, there may have been a specific port to the PSP. But yeah, so I've got a link here to the visual novel database about this, developed and published by Kid. again. And this is also with scenario by the same scenario writer of Erde, Nishi Kawamoto. Paraphrasing from a couple of reviews of this that I saw, it says it's an original work. It's depicting a near future. They describe the ideas as surprising and interesting, although they may be in response to current affairs. I'm not sure what current affairs they were describing at the time, although honestly it may have just been that Chobits came out and people were interested in, what if there was like a robot girl that you could fall in love with, right? And I think maybe I mention it later in here, but I think this is the one where like you basically get this girl comes in a box, right? She's not set up properly, right? She's supposed to like be this fully featured robot, but instead what happens is like her brain gets zapped, so she just has this really childlike mind, right? So very similar to Chobits, which I'm not saying is that in a bad way, right? They say they haven't completed the game, but they can feel the charm of the characters in the game. The music is also good, and they recommend the soundtrack. This one person anecdotally highly recommends this game. I'm like, okay, whatever. Somebody else was talking about this, and they're like, compared to other ADVs of the time, I'm not sure what they mean by the standing picture screen. I just ran this through like Google Translate, but I think what they're talking about is like the character portraits, right? Is super interesting. So they say the characters zoom in and out, and the background scrolls. They say you never get tired of just looking at them. So that's interesting. I guess like we can see here, it zooms in and out. It seems like just for an adventure game, right? Like they try some unique things. They say, in addition, the character's facial expressions change in the middle of text, which is a very fine art, right? You know what they're saying. Also unusually for this type of adventure games, the bad endings are worth seeing. So if you'll be motivated to see all the endings, and in addition, the optional clear list shows the achievements and level of each scene, which makes the game very rewarding. I'm not sure how well I'm selling this, but basically the more I've looked into this game, and it also has a couple of games in the series. There's a follow-up called My Merry Maybe. This just seems to be fairly well received and doing some interesting things for an adventure game, right? I like the idea that like there definitely are multiple endings, that like they're kind of worth seeing, like these are all things that just kind of instill confidence in me when I read about, people say these types of things about a game, especially a game like this with a premise basically like Chobits. Again, like I'm kind of reaching out to you guys because I'm like, let me know if you see this and you're like, yeah, this is the game that I would like to see translated, because there's a bunch of games I'd like to see translated, right? And I don't see myself being able to translate all the games that I want. Last but not least, Sister Princess. So let me go ahead. I started a little Let's Play on this. I only did two videos in that. They're about 20 minutes long. Clearly, I am interested in this game. I started playing it. It's developed by Stack Software and published by MediaWorks. These are not developers and publishers that I'm especially familiar with, but it's Sister Princess, right? So the player has 12 lovable little sisters and about a month to spend with them. So again, adventure game, romantic adventure game. Each day is broken up into 3 segments. As the player continues to interact with the sisters, their reactions to their big brother will change accordingly until the ending. Each sister has a normal ending and a non-blood relation ending. Now, I don't really know what to say about that. Clearly, that might creep some people out. Like, I'm not saying that it doesn't creep me out in like a real life sense, right? But in terms of a not real life sense, right? This is this is fantasy, this is a video game, and I think it's such a fun premise. Like, your parents are like these kind of delinquent absentee parents, right? They're traveling around the world, sort of indulging in their capricious lifestyle and just having children. Okay, and as they travel around having children in Paris and in all these foreign countries and stuff that they're living in at the time, those children are like attending schools there and stuff like that, and then coming to Japan and meeting you, kind of, right? You're meeting their brother and coming back to Japan where their parents are from and stuff like that. So this is sort of the introductory scene where, like, this is Katen. She's kind of the first sister who invites you to this party to see all of your other sisters, and you get introduced to all of your various sisters. And yeah, I mean, really, I think this is one of those games. Again, it was, like, I guess, based on this reader interaction sort of narrative that this Dengeki G's magazine did. So I find that really interesting. I'm not sure exactly what other related media there is for Sister Princess aside from a television series, a 24-episode animated TV series. This game had a big impact when it came out, right? This is just one of those things. I mean, I guess I spawned, I talk about the TV series, but there were other games in this series too, right? There was a lot of buzz around this back in the day. So it reminds me of back then when, Sister Princess was like a big deal, where everyone was watching the anime, everyone was, whatever, collecting the figures or, reading the doujinshi or whatever it is that they were doing, and you kind of just wanted to be a part of that, right? And I always wanted to, like, play this game and just appreciate it, just another kind of fun romantic adventure game. Again, like, it's I think it's pretty PG, I guess, you know what I'm saying? It's on the Dreamcast and things like that. It does sound like the non-blood relation endings, depending on kind of like the age of your sisters, can lead to like a marriage style ending, right? It's just pretty sweet, I think, right? So I think this is a really sweet game, and yeah, I would be interested in translating it. So if you guys are interested in me translating this, please let me know. There are some things I wanted to talk about that were just rejected, just so you know that I considered some of this stuff. No one's really going to care about this, but Fudei for the PlayStation and Dreamcast, this has strong ties to developers who worked on First Kiss Story. Again, if you follow our PCFX fan club podcast at all, you'll be more familiar with probably First Kiss Story and the developers at Hunex who worked on that, the staff. This was published by D3 because it was part of their Simple series. It was, I think, the third maybe in the like Simple series for the Dreamcast that were romantic adventure games, right? The thing with Fudei is I like that it was developed by people who developed First Kiss Story, but First Kiss Story is also available on the Dreamcast. Not only that, but First Kiss Story 2, the sequel. If I'm going to translate First Kiss Story, I want to translate that on the PCFX. So I'm not going to do it on the Dreamcast, and I'm not going to translate First Kiss Story 2 until First Kiss Story 1 is done. And if I'm going to translate Fudei, I think I would translate First Kiss Story before I would translate Fudei. So I kind of crossed that off the list. Desperia. We can look at some of this stuff. So this is my gameplay for Desperia. This seems super interesting. It was developed by Deno Eizo Seisakusho Limited. It was published by Atlas. All right. So you guys are probably here like, why in the world are you not like, considering this game for translation? This would probably be a shoe-in, honestly. It's a first-person post-apocalyptic sci-fi RPG adventure. Think of it as more of an RPG, more of an adventure game, right? I feel like the RPG elements are probably pretty light in this. It almost is more like Myst inspired, it seems really cool, right? You talk to the characters, you pick. It's got a wonderful atmosphere. Anyway, it's really interesting. The main thing is, I feel like when I was talking about this 4 years ago, nobody knew about this game, but within the past 2 or 3 years, I feel like more people have been making videos about this game. Somebody did a whole playthrough and translated it for this game on YouTube, so people know about this game. It's out there. If a translation project were going to happen, I think it would be more like somebody, we got somebody that was willing to do the technical work, and then get that person who actually did that playthrough and posted, like translated the whole thing to translate the script for the for the game. So I'm just not the right person, I don't think, now. Like if it was 5 years ago, maybe I would have been like, okay, I'm gonna translate Desperia, but now it's like that just doesn't make sense. It makes more sense for other people to do this than me. Seireki Rayblade was another one I was considering. This is developed and published by Winkysoft. It's effectively spiritually part of the Super Robot Wars series. It's not part of the series, but it's the developers of Super Robot Wars making a turn-based tactical RPG that is very similar to Robot Wars. It's probably more of a spiritual successor to this game called Maso Kishin, the Lord of Elemental, on the Saturn. I'm just basically anecdotally, someone was saying that, right? I haven't actually played that game or know really anything about it, but apparently it's another kind of one-off game that seems to be set probably similarly to this game, that is not part of the Super Robot Wars series, but is basically a Super Robot Wars game. There are other people who I know, like Gideon Z, who are major Super Robot Wars fans, who work on translation projects. There is a Super Robot Wars game on the Dreamcast, which probably should be translated before Seireki Rayblade. I think I was more interested in Seireki Rayblade because it isn't a Super Robot Wars game, and I'm like, you know what? This is another thing that isn't for me, right? I don't really want to translate a Super Robot Wars game, and I do like tactical RPG games, but I'm not super into, always into the giant robots and stuff like that. So that's a pass for me. And a lot of other things that I was really interested in are PC ports. Canvas, Princess Holiday, Bittersweet Fools, Revive. Nijue was actually one of the first things that I thought of. It has a PC port with 18 plus elements. And I'm like, you know what? If someone's going to bother translating that and playing that, you might as well play that version of the game, right? Not the Dreamcast version. We're looking at these exclusives, these cross-platform games that are, are doing really interesting things on the Dreamcast, or just seem really interesting narratively to me. And thank you for watching this. I know it's horrendously long. Please let me know. Please put in a comment. This is my choice. Number 1, number 2, number 3. However many you want to do, you can rank this entire list if you want. But at least give me one or more games ranked in order that you would like to see translated for the Dreamcast. I'm going to take people's recommendations into consideration strongly as I'm considering what 1 or 2 games it is that I want to try to maybe translate for the Dreamcast. I hope that we're going to get 1 or 2 translation projects done for the Dreamcast over the next couple of years, and I think that will be really exciting, and I hope that you'll join me again when I decide to do another video. Thank you so much, and I hope you join me later. Take care.